All right. Well, let's talk about the top 5 games that we're going to see for the 2025 season. There's going to be obviously a lot of really good matchups. I feel like this year in particular, I look at the schedule and every single week it's like, oh damn, I want to watch this one. Oh, this one's great. Like we had 12 great weeks of college football this past season, and upcoming season will not disappoint as well. But let's talk about what we think could potentially be the top 5 games. Obviously, you got to go with Bama, Georgia, right? Like that has been incredibly good and slash meaningful every year. I mean,
Yeah, I
see it.
and both teams are in such different spots, right? Like UGA, obviously a little bit down for them, but still like a
Yeah.
pretty impressive year. Trying to get over that Bama hump. Like Georgia's beat them once in the national championship with Kirby there.
Yeah.
And outside of that, like he just can't find a way to beat them. Even in a year where they underperformed and lost 4 games and everything else, like that was the one that he just couldn't get. I mean, it seems to
Yeah.
be the one that he can't get over the hump. Finally, in Athens, it feels like
Mm-hmm.
there's never like all of Georgia's big games feel like they're on the road.
Yeah.
Obviously, they play the cocktail party in
Well,
Jacksonville every year, but they
Kirby's
played.
your ear, huh? Because that's what he would tell
I
us.
have wanted to see a big game in Athens. I feel like forever, and I know Tennessee goes there. That's never like it's always hyped, and then they end up blowing them out. But yeah, I think it'll be fun to have a really big game in Athens this year. Man, just watching that Georgia Tech game, obviously their rivalry game at the end, and obviously it's fun because it goes at 8 overtimes. But like that place was on fire. And so like I can only imagine what it's going to be like when Bama comes to town. That to me, we didn't really put these in any kind of order, but to me, that might be the best one.
I
Like
really
that
wish
might be the one.
um, I really wish we were going to get to play there when they do the renovations to the stadium in Jacksonville. That'll be Tampa, Atlanta, home and home. But I really think they messed up, and that should have been a Gainesville, Athens, home and home. I think, when they did renovations in Jacksonville in the 90s, Florida and Georgia played a home and home. Florida got to play between the hedges there. Spurrier was coach. And like, I almost feel like each college football generation should get to experience that. So I'm protesting that. All right.
I
So
wish on that, it should just rotate. Like it should just
I mean, I'm
one,
good with it being
one,
being at the world's largest outdoor cocktail party permanently. But when once a generation we renovate the stadium that it's in, it should get to go on those campuses. Like, why are we doing Tampa and Atlanta when we could do Gainesville and Athens?
I think what would we talk about the general? I mean, I would love if every class got to experience it, right? Like nobody stays for 4 years anyway. But if you played like Jacksonville, Gainesville, Atlanta, Georgia, like did that every 4 years, like that would be fun to me.
Yeah.
That'd be a lot of fun. I don't know. I mean, I've only been once. And so I know there's a lot of people that love that game in Jacksonville, but I think it'd be fun if it rotated around a little bit.
Well, so let's continue down this list in no particular order. A game I am super excited about that will be happening in Gainesville is Florida, Texas. And this is kind of interesting because DJ Lagway will be the quarterback for Florida. Arch Manning will be the starting quarterback for Texas. 2 guys with top 5 Heisman odds for this upcoming year, both seen as kind of the future of both programs. I think that is going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, I think the quarterback matchup makes that so much fun, and maybe it's a little different having a game in there that wasn't particularly close this year, but obviously with Lagway and Arch playing against each other, and
There's
it might not
storylines too,
for sure. Yeah, and Florida in that game, like Florida's got a really tough open to their year. Like I know they play a couple of pretty big cupcakes early. But then they play LSU, Miami, Texas in back games. There's a bye week between the Miami and Texas game, but they come out the gate like playing some pretty, could be 3 top 10 teams. I think that one is going to be a ton of fun. And again, the quarterback matchup that it is, we've seen Arch some, we saw Lagway a ton this year. Lagway wasn't incredibly impressive statistically, but just made some plays that you were just like, holy crap.
he made it better. Yeah.
Both guys like kind of in their prove it year, right? Like, I mean, they'll both play, I think, another year, even though Arch has, a year to kind of could go pro. But yeah, I think that that one's a fun one, mostly for the quarterback matchup. Can Florida was Florida's finish? I mean, tell us about it, right? Like, was Florida's finish, were they able to parlay that into a good start next year? Obviously they didn't start very well in 2024. Can they start well, right? And be in that game against Texas? Can they win that game against Texas, right? Like probably the number 2 or 3 team in the country at that point.
how that game went this year if Florida was healthy, if DJ Lagway, if you remember, people watching at home, DJ Lagway did not play in that game. Graham Mertz did not play in that game. Florida essentially did not prepare for that game, right? They were missing half of their defense. They were missing a couple wide receivers. And there was not a single moment in that game that Florida was truly in that game. I would have loved to see a fully healthy Florida play that game, though, because it felt like there were opportunities that Florida just had absolutely you know, no attempt to take advantage of. So that would have been an interesting one. But I am excited for that this year. What about Georgia, Texas? This is a game we saw three times? No, two times,
Yeah.
twice this year. I don't know how many times we're going to see it next year. That feels like Bama, Georgia, where there's an opportunity for us to see it multiple times in a season. But it feels like, you said this to me earlier, it's a small sample size so far, but it feels like Kirby has Sark's number.
Yeah, and that first one, like Georgia just dominated, but there was really no excuse for Texas to lose the second one. And so this game, again, in Athens, another huge game at home as opposed to going on the road. And it does. Like, if you had to predict right now, who are the two teams that you think are going to the SEC championship in 2025? And we would both say Georgia, Texas. We both just said they were going to be both set up for success. Like, if you're putting money on it, this might be a preview of the SEC championship. Like, we could have this game 4 times within a 12-month period. And so, yeah, this will probably be, again, not breaking any news here. This will probably be the highest ranked matchup in the SEC in 2025. And this game will have so much hype around it. So yeah, to me, we didn't put these in any kind of order. This is probably number one.
Another one we have on our list is interesting for a couple different reasons, but LSU Ole Miss. These teams are two teams that were eliminated from playoff contention pretty late in the season, Florida knocking both of them out. But they are two that seem to go head to head against each other a lot for portal guys, right? And both are teams that are kind of built that way. They're built more on portal guys than even high school recruiting. And I feel like it's always fun. It's always kind of a wild matchup. Brian Kelly, potentially on the hot seat this year. LSU has seeing Notre Dame win a national championship, or not win, play for a national championship 3 years after he left because there wasn't going to be an opportunity for a national championship at Notre Dame, probably has LSU fans scratching their heads a little bit.
I feel like LSU has done, and this isn't a shot, it's going to sound like a shot, maybe they would agree, but I feel like they've done less with more.
Sure.
Right? Like in 2020,
they have top 5 talent.
Yeah, in 2023, to have Jaden Daniels in his second year on your team and still go 9-3, and have two elite wide receivers that are crushing it in the NFL on that team too. Like that, they just haven't been good enough. Like this year, they had everything out in front of them. And then they lost 3 games in a row down the stretch to finish 8-4, losing to, just getting, embarrassed by Alabama. They went on the road and lost to A&M, and then losing in the Swamp, which officially knocked them out of things. They have done less with more. And I think, Brian Kelly at LSU is just good, not great. Right. And so he's got to end that narrative. And then kind of the same thing with Ole Miss. They've won back-to-back 10 win. They've had back-to-back 10-win seasons, which for Ole Miss, it's a little different. First of all, they've been better than LSU, I think, but their expectations aren't as high.
Ole Miss.
Yeah. But is Lane ever going to get over the hump? Right.
Well,
is he ever going to get to that playoff?
They were on a roller coaster with Lane this season, beginning of the season when Florida was doing poorly and there was talk about would Florida steal Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss fans were incredibly offended, and this was their coach for life. And then they dropped a game or two that they shouldn't, and all of a sudden they weren't sure if maybe they should go ahead and preemptively get rid of Lane Kiffin. They liked him again by the end of the season, but it was definitely not all, sunshine and roses with Lane Kiffin just this very year. Not enough to say he's on the hot seat. I don't think he is, but I would say that Ole Miss fans feel that Lane drops at least 1 game a year that he shouldn't.
And this year was 2.
And that year was 2. And that does bother them.
Yeah, and they had the big win. It's almost like you had the big win against Georgia, so you maybe get away with one of those losses. Like you beat Georgia, you lose to Florida, like that kind of cancels out. But then to drop the Kentucky game too, that was Kentucky's last win of the year,
Yeah.
in like what, week 3. Yeah, you just can't do that. So number 1 and number 2 in the portal rankings right now: LSU first, Ole Miss second. Ole Miss taking 22 guys, LSU taking 16. So yeah, a lot of their rosters are built through that. They've done a really good job there. Who does it translate for better? I also think you look at Ole Miss has to play Georgia, and again another one in Athens. LSU has to play Bama. So you're kind of thinking like, and that one's in Tuscaloosa. So you're kind
Right.
of thinking like, and both teams typically drop a game they're not supposed to. So if you're thinking that both teams have like 2 losses, this one could be for who has that third loss, who doesn't make the playoff, right? Because a 10-2 SEC team is almost assuredly going to get in, and so. If that's the case, this to me feels like it could be an elimination game
Both
for the playoff.
get Florida in their hometowns, which is an interesting point of reference as well. So the last team on this list we have is, or the last game on this list we have is the Iron Bowl, which I think is, one of the ones that everybody kind of circles, right? This is generally a huge mashup. Auburn, maybe on the upswing. I don't know. Alabama, uh, kind of not sure what we're going to get from them this year. I hate to say that DeBoer is on the hot seat going into year 2, but when you follow Nick Saban, you're kind of on the hot seat following year 2 if you don't make the playoffs. And the interesting thing about this to watch is, we talked about this in a previous episode. When you look at the top 10 players out of the state of Alabama and where they normally go versus where they went last year, this year, I think 6 of the top 10 are committed to Auburn and none of the top 10 are committed to Alabama. And it's an interesting point of reference because Saban always locked down the state. Auburn was getting scraps, if anything, when Nick Saban was there. If that's going to change, then that probably changes something for this game.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think there was one year since Nick Saban was there that Auburn had more of the top 10 recruits, but it never happened that Alabama had none of the top 10 recruits in the state. It is a 1-year sample size, it is a one-off, but it's also the only year we have to measure Kalen DeBoer. And you think about Alabama, like all the games that we've just mentioned, they go to Georgia. They have to play LSU, who again could be really good this year. They got to go to Tennessee. That's kind of on our. We got some honorable mentions. They got to go to Tennessee, or I'm sorry, they play Tennessee at home. Shoot, how crazy is this? And I think they win this game, right? Like I'm not going to go full homer on it, but they're only a 7.5 point favorite in Doak next year,
Yeah, that's
like
great.
an early line. I mean, most of that being Florida State's got, I think it was 16 out of 22 new starters. So how the heck do you even know what they're going to be next year? But I mean, I don't think they do. So I'm not putting that out there. But like, if they were to drop that game, like the rest of the SEC schedule they have to play,
Or make it back to
they
Tuscaloosa if they
they
drop
gotta they gotta go to South Carolina, who was super hot this year.
it.
Like this is not easy. And the game against Auburn is in Jordan Hare. So like I never think Bama's gonna lose that game when it's in Tuscaloosa. Like I
But
just
there's
like
always wild things that happen in Jordan
when
Hare.
it's in Auburn, and both coaches again, feels like Auburn might be on the upswing a little bit, but I don't think that Hugh Freeze is like super comfortable in his seat right now either. I don't
Right.
think people are out on him by any means. But the loser of that game is going to, now if Bama goes 11-0 and loses that one, then who cares, right? But the loser of that game I think it's going to get pretty tough for them. So there's a ton of intrigue on that one.
Yeah, I agree. So we have a lot of honorable mentions, and there's actually one in the comments of the video that is not on your list that I would put in there, and it's Tennessee, Florida, the last game of the season in Gainesville, or the last game of the SEC season. And I hate this, and I will tell you why. I have PTSD from 2001 when September 11th happened. It was a Tuesday of that week. Florida was supposed to play Tennessee that Saturday. All college football games were canceled out of respect to what had happened in New York, and it was moved to the last game of the season, which was actually the first weekend of December. It was like the 2nd of December, something like that. Anyway, when we played them, Ernest Graham was hurt because Darnell Dockett had twisted his knee the week before against Florida State. I believe, I want to say it was, I'm trying to think of who was the running back for Tennessee that had been hurt week 3, which is when we were supposed to play them, but then healthy when we did play him. He ran for like 250 yards against us. I'll have to Google whoever this was. I want to say Derrick Henry, but that's wrong. That was Alabama. But I need to look and see who that was. But anyway, Florida
Travis
loses.
Stevens.
What?
Is
Travis
it Travis Stevens?
Travis Stevens. It was Travis Stevens. I want to say they had a running back duo at that point that was incredible. I was 16, so this is me, remembering all this. But anyway, Florida misses the SEC championship game because of this. Um Rex Grossman doesn't win the Heisman. He probably should have. He is, I would say, if Florida had a Heisman miss, so somebody that should have won it that didn't, it's Rex Grossman in that year. I don't like Tennessee at the end of the year. I think every single season, Tennessee starts out bumpy, and by the end of the year, they're generally clicking on all cylinders. I would always rather play a Tennessee team week 3 than week 12. This scares me. I don't like it. Um, Yuck. This is one
I
of
do.
the mentions.
So as somebody who doesn't care as much about this, like I care about the game because it's college football, but like I don't care when it's. But I do like the intrigue of it. I do like how it's different. I think it's cool that it's something we haven't seen.
Don't normally
I would
see.
never, I would never want it with this matchup. Um, but like, could you imagine if something was going on and like they had to play the Florida State game like in October or something weird? Like, I would never want that, but it
Yeah,
would, as an outsider, like looking in who didn't have a dog in the fight, like it would be kind of interesting. Or the Iron Bowl was on Labor Day or something. I don't know.
right.
Again, if I was a fan of that team, like I don't want them to move Florida State or Florida, and I'm sure Bama fans don't want. But as an outsider, I think it's kind of cool to see it at a different time. Just because of exactly what you mentioned. Like, what do both teams look like? I mean, it could work out really, really well for Florida. Maybe DJ is like absolutely clicking at that point of the year, and I tend to like the ACC schedule is being released right now. I'm not even looking at it, but I tend to think that most of the time when you play people
Yeah.
matters some, but not as much as
This
now, if there's
feels
it's
very
mostly like how you play, right? Like that matters. So
now.
I like that one.
Florida, Tennessee, to me, and this is as a Gator fan, is the third week of September. Same reason that Bama fans and Tennessee fans will tell you the third Saturday in October is, the Tennessee Bama game, and that is tradition for them. The third
That one
Saturday
did get preserved. That one did stay the same.
get preserved, yes. The third Saturday in September for me is Florida, Tennessee, and again, it probably is. I want to say it was like 34 30 or 34, 32, something like that. It was Tennessee ended up going to the SEC championship game instead of Florida. It was against LSU. There's so many things that set up. Florida could have potentially played for a national title. That was an incredibly good team that was incredibly banged up for that game, but was 100% healthy when it was supposed to be played. And it just has driven me nuts for, 20 years at this point,
Too
24
too many
years.
excuses.
But
A couple other honorable mentions. We mentioned the cocktail party. Actually, we did mention the cocktail party. Cocktail party is interesting just
yeah.
because it's one of the bigger rivalries. I have the Red River on here too.
I do
Um,
think if there's an opportunity for Florida to get Georgia sometime in the near future, it's potentially this year. We don't know. We say it's the Stockton era. Will that change? I don't know. It's not the Rashada era. I'll tell you that much. I feel more comfortable playing him than I did playing Carson Beck. I think we watched what happened last season, and had Ladley not gotten hurt, there was a great chance the Gators could have gotten them last season. I just kind of feels like Georgia's maybe a tick worse than they've been in previous years, and that won't be for long. With Kirby Smart as their head coach, they will absolutely bounce back, and so it just kind of feels like if there's an opportunity to get him, it's potentially this season.
yeah, if Napier goes 0-5 against them, again, if they win 9 games and one of the losses is Georgia, but like just the idea of him going 0-5 would be pretty crazy against Georgia. Not that
I have maintained since year one of the Napier era that your record against your rivals gets you fired faster than your overall record.
yeah.
Or it should.
We mentioned Bama, Tennessee. I think that's an interesting one. Ole Miss, UGA, one that will have some implications there. How about Oklahoma and Auburn? Maybe one that is a sneaky good one, just because, again, talking about coaches, the loser of that game feels like they could be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Hugh Freeze, they found a way to blow it last year against a terrible Oklahoma team with a pick six late. I was actually in Tuscaloosa watching that one, and everybody went crazy when it happened, which was kind of fun at the bar. And then OU Texas, just a big rivalry. Can Oklahoma
There's
bounce
just
back
fun
at all?
around that one, and it's so fun.
Yeah. So there's some fun ones for sure.
Yeah, definitely some interesting games next season for sure.